see him and pick the dying one up in his arms. The arms of compassion. That's how the story goes. He then takes him to an inn and says, whatever the cost is, I will sacrifice in order that this man be taken care of. The question to me, and the question at the end of the story, is not whether the fellow survived or not. It was the question of eternal life working itself out in the Samaritan, in the dying one, the dying other. So the answer here is where the cruelty of religion ends and the consolation of redemptive nature begins. Hidden in our answer is the Samaritan, who had eternal life already at work within, causing a porosity, causing an open space to be there for the other who was half dead physically, even as the Samaritan was considered spiritually dead by the self-deceived. Good in this case is upside down. It is the dying one being in the caring arms of the other, who has eternal life at work within. I'll give you one quick story. Mary Vargovic, hard life, grew up in an alcoholic family, beaten, goes out, married once, gone the second time, finds redemption from her hard life. Hard woman, Rosie the Riveter, one of those sorts in the Second World War, finds redemption from her once chemically dependent son, has a fairly decent life. Her husband drops over dead, and she lives 25 years after that on a little bit of money that he left. And it was a fairly good life. Fell, fractured the hip at 85. Then, in a slow decline in progressive and severe Alzheimer's dementia, was found to be in a nursing home, unable to wipe her own bottom, unable to feed herself, at times not recognizing those who loved her, those who had held her in the arms. Sometimes the only thing that she could care for was that one taste of cool water, the one taste of yogurt, the one taste of pudding. $8,500 a month in the medical industrial complex bled her care, bled the finances she had. Yet those who loved her made sure she got treated for her pneumonia with oral medication, not IV. There were moments of awareness, and in the end there was a moment of reconciliation where the separated child came with her in reconciliation when she had a moment, a flash of awareness was made, and her final pneumonia necessitated intravenous solution that she wouldn't understand. You couldn't put an IV in her. You couldn't put a feeding tube in the stomach. That was something she wouldn't understand, and she would pull those out of her arm. That's extraordinary, and that would be burdensome. So Mary Vargovic died. She died answering the question, what is good? Good was a mother not mistaken for a hat, as Oliver Sacks would say. Not in it, but in other. Because of an inward transformation of those who were with her, she was treated and protected with greatest respect, a voiceless one, a helpless one, in the caring arms of the other, who had eternal life at work within. Finally, facing a good death in the face of the other. The third question, and a difficult one, and this one would be for all you and me, it's one that haunts me. How can I believe in a good God that allows such suffering? The story begins with a narrative extolling the rectitude of a moral man named Job. He is prosperous in family, friends, community, and material goods. In the unseen realm, as the mythos goes, in the unseen realm, there's the spiritual realm. God provokes Satan to test Job's piety, and the test ensues, first with removal of Job's family, then his wealth, and then his personal health. Skin for skin, I tell you, a man will give everything he has from his skin. He'll curse you and then he'll die. He is only pious because he's prosperous, God, because you made him that way. Well, Job undergoes horrific trials and sufferings. His wife, in despair, calls for him to curse God and kill himself or be killed. But Job answers, shall we not receive the good as well as the bad? And all this, Job did not sin in his lips. However, that says nothing in his heart. And the story goes on at length, recounting accusation from Job's friends that he has hidden sin, followed by a like remonstrance from Job on each account. Job's sin, however, is finally laid bare as he, the Elohi of the Elohim, the judge of judges at the gate, accuses God of wrongdoing, saying he was righteous in his own eyes, and that God's righteousness paled in his eyes. He was beyond God's righteousness. He was even as God himself. After God cross-examines Job, he changes his mind, declaring his lack of capacity to think, judge, act, or even exist in a way like the non-contingent other, that is, God, exists. Hence, Job's act and lesson of redemption. For us, it looks like this. Why is Job's termination appeal by his wife not an act of beneficence, removing his human suffering? For Job, it was a purification, a purging of the one thing lacking in his spiritual being. There was something greater for others. And they say, well, that's Job, doesn't work for me. It may be for some who are hanging on the possibility of the greatest thing other, and that is loosing from the second death. Why is Job's termination not a right of self-determination? That is, Job exists within a larger eternal story surrounding him, not in a story unto himself. Third, why is Job's termination not an act to be trusted in community justice for the common good? Well, in this story, his miserable comforters certainly had no clue what was going on. He couldn't trust his neighbor. Even as Corrie ten Boom, the Auschwitz survivor, said, I had the hardest time forgiving my neighbors who said they loved me, and they were the ones who turned me in. They are the ones who turned my family in for the death of my sister, etc. The problem is the difficulty of trusting not those who might govern now, but those who may govern in the future. And if we look at the past, we can see that everything from Belgium's broad criteria of euthanasia, which now is quickly moving toward mental illness, to the Netherlands, the Groningen Protocol, to Serbia, to the rape camps, to Cambodia and Pol Pot, the killing fields, the Eastern Bloc of Ceausescu and Timisoara, Stalin, Mao, Hitler, those who ruled Largus' Rome, and those who caught the Pythagoreans to write the Hippocratic effort. We cannot necessarily trust the other. We can't even necessarily trust ourselves. That would be a self-righteousness. And then Corrie ten Boom lays it out once again. She says, when asked how she could not judge those that caused the death of her sister that she loved, she says, there is a little Nazi in each one of us. How could she say that? If you bring the stories of the Nevi'im of Tanakh, like the prophet Jeremiah, to fore and give it meaning to our story, the prophet says that the heart is deceitful above all things. Who can know it? Or in the Johannine corpus of literature, there's an issue where Jesus said, I don't trust any man, because he knew what was in man. Or the Pauline corpus of 3:10, where the statement is made, there's none righteous in this world, no, not one. The answer to good in this section is, good becomes a temporal suffering that opens a space for the afflicted to see glimpses of God and his severe mercy and loyal love worked out in their suffering for their good and at the death in futurity eternal. My time is running, so I only have one quick ending story. Her name is Joy Christofferson, a daughter of a missionary. Walked away for a sensual life of pleasure. Stricken, her beauty lost, her 110-pound petiteness gone. Her hair, which was once nice and blonde, fallen out. Central nervous system lymphoma throughout. She chose radiation to extend her life 6 months, maybe just 14 weeks. The doctors, however, were surprised to find that she went far beyond that and basically abandoned her after she was deemed healed. Joy now sits in a wheelchair in a nursing home, but she is different. What was the trade-off? She found the shalom. She found a sense of peace and contentment for what she had lost and turned away from. In a severe mercy she now was grasped by. And she takes that to those dying ones that sit around the tables waiting for Godot. Her story, the good temporal suffering opens a space for the afflicted to see glimpses of God's severe mercy and loyal love worked out in their suffering for their good now and at death in futurity eternal. And my conclusion is this. You heard me begin with my conflict, because this isn't just for me a philosophical study or story or a theological one. I have the feces on my hand. I smell the urine in the rooms that I go to for the ethical consult. I see the tears of the others, and I would be less than honest with you to say that I at times am not conflicted when I see such suffering. So I gave you a yes and no. I invited you into my deepest reflections as a Christian, to let some of you who want nothing to do with it inside someone's head to see, this is how they think. Well, that's interesting. It leads you to my answer to my culminating question, euthanasia, a good death? I hope to have brought you into my space of understanding of good constructed through 3 questions and 3 stories from a Christian perspective, constructed in a narrative philosophy and theology, a space that concludes with this ultimate point. The good of a good death lies not in the hardness or softness of passing, but rather in the presence of eternal life that precludes a second death. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Wernow. Our second speaker tonight is Lani Roberts. Dr. Roberts is a member of the Department of Philosophy at OSU, where she has taught ethical theory, the ethics of diversity, and feminist philosophy since 1989. She holds a Ph.D. in philosophy from the University of Oregon. She has won several university awards, including the Meehan Award for Excellence in Teaching and the Dar Reese Excellence in Advising Award. She has twice been named a Mortar Board Top Professor. As a social philosopher, she studies the human propensity to harm one another individually and in social groups. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Roberts.
Greetings, everyone. Dr. Wernow, nice to meet you. Thank you for inviting me to offer my ideas tonight. I accepted this invitation to try to live C.S. Lewis's ideals in sharing of thoughts in an open, friendly manner with civility. And it's with this expectation that I've come to share my ideas this evening. I'm starting out with a story titled Dad. In March 1997, 3 months short of his 80th birthday, my father died in a hospital. He had been suffocating to death over months, really for years, from emphysema, with once-a-month, week-long stays in the hospital for treatment of pneumonia. Suffocating to death is one of the more difficult ways to die because it creates high levels of anxiety no matter what we tell ourselves. Our body knows we are not getting sufficient oxygen. He had to learn to sleep sitting up. He could no longer breathe lying down at all. After months and months of increasing difficulty with oxygen intake, my father told his doctor that the next bout of pneumonia, he would choose not to be resuscitated. He and his wife had discussed it and told his doctor, no more heroic efforts. Once the lungs lost their capacity to exchange oxygen for carbon dioxide in the blood, there was nothing more to do. At his age, he was not a candidate for a lung transplant. My father's wife called me at the end of finals week, March 1997, and urged me to get to my hometown as soon as possible because my father was hospitalized with pneumonia one more time, and she knew this would be the last hospitalization. I arrived in time to spend a good part of the evening with Dad, including feeding him frozen yogurt. We told each other, I love you. I went to a friend's house to get some sleep, and at 4 a.m. the phone rang. My dad's wife called me to come to the hospital immediately. Dad was in a coma. Even unconscious, the anxiety produced by oxygen deprivation is significant. I had been an EMT for 10 years, so I understood much of what was happening. His longtime physician came to speak to my dad's wife and me and told us how much he cared about my dad, and that if it was his own father, he would let him go. We agreed. Over the next 6 hours or so, until his death, his physician ordered certain drugs to be administered so that Dad would die in complete and total comfort. Most of the pain meds or anti-anxiety drugs slow respirations, and as respirations are slowed, metabolizing of added